And an update now on what's happening with the Guantanamo Bay detainees. Military officials are defending a violent clash that took place this weekend between detainees and those guarding them. Now, attorneys for those being held say that they were not allowed to communicate with their clients. This comes after 2 months or longer of a hunger strike among the detainees, which first began in one of the longest and largest in the detention center's history. Now, more than 50 detainees are taking part in the strike, with at least 15 being force-fed. Now, the Constitution Project Task Force just released a scathing report on the detainee treatment in prisons and detention centers from Gitmo to Afghanistan to Iraq. After 2 years of study, they say that what's happening to these detainees constitutes torture, adding perhaps the most important or notable finding of this panel is that the indisputable fact that the United States engaged in practice of torture. The second notable conclusion of the task force is that the nation's highest officials bear some responsibility for allowing and contributing the spread of torture. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by David Reams, human rights and defense attorney representing detainees in Guantanamo. Hi there, David.
Hello.
So can you tell me what's happening in this clash that happened on Saturday? Give us an update here.
Well, we don't know exactly what happened. All we have is the military's word for what happened, which I don't take at face value. But according to reports, the military moved most of the men who were in the most populous camp, Camp 6, which was a communal living arrangement, into Camp 5, which is an isolation cell arrangement. They gave as a reason that they couldn't monitor the men in Camp 6 because the men had covered the cameras. That doesn't wash because that situation has been going on for 2 or 3 months now. I think that they're just trying to break the hunger strike, and they picked a particularly brutal way to do it.
So the way I understand it, military shows up in riot gear. They essentially storm, so basically that's not what happened, but we're not really sure what happened. Do we know how many prisoners were involved?
Well, I do think it's clear that they moved the detainees, and I do think it's clear that they used riot police and so forth. And now it's emerging that there were casualties on both sides. Blood was shed. We don't know more than that, I should say. And again, all we have is what the military tells us.
Certainly, since no attorneys are being allowed to communicate with their clients at this point, the way that I understand it, no cameras inside to kind of record what's happening, so we kind of have to take their word at face value. Do we know what sparked this, or is it just that underlying measure of trying to break up the strike?
Well, on the issue of communication, it appears to be a rather arbitrary policy. I have a call scheduled at 9:30 tomorrow morning with a 90-minute call scheduled tomorrow morning with one of my clients, Yasin Ismail. We were informed by the Justice Department yesterday that he was being force-fed. Maybe they reserve calls for that kind of an urgent situation. What sparked the hunger strike in immediate terms was the military's attempt to reinstitute the policy of Quran searches, something that it had given up 7 or 8 years ago after a similar hunger strike. It's not the way that the Qurans are being searched, it's the very fact that they're being searched that offends the men. I don't think that there would have been such an explosive reaction, though, without the underlying problem of indefinite detention, that these men are entering their 12th year without charge, without any end in sight. I think that that was the combustible situation, and the Quran search was the match that lit the fuse.
Certainly. So you mentioned one of your clients and finally being able to communicate with him tomorrow, and the way that we understand it, he is one of those detainees being force-fed. Is he able to talk to you at all about what's happening to him, or is he in a state where he, tell me about him?
Well, I only will know the answer to that question tomorrow when I speak to him. In the past, he's been very lucid, and he's told us a great deal about what has happened in his case over the years and during the hunger strike, as a matter of fact. I was there in early March, and I heard many details from many of my detainee clients.
See, so the Constitution Project Task Force has determined that what's happening to these men is in fact torturous. Can you give us an inside look at what essentially is going on with these guys? What's happening to them directly?
What's happening now is a return to Bush-era policies of detention operations. The authorities try to demonstrate over and over again that they're in charge. Before a recent turnover in command, the situation was peaceful and quiet. With this new command and its show of force, the situation has become mayhem. The command has stormed Camp 6. The command has been present when a tower guard fired into a crowd of detainees in January. And the authorities, of course, were present for the search. Actually present, has authorized or tolerated. All of these events have built up, and you have the underlying problem of indefinite detention. That certainly is torture.
Okay, so talk to me about this raid. Do you think it's going to have any impact at all on the hunger strike that's happening?
My sense from meeting with the men and talking with them over the phone is that it will only increase their resolve. The problem with the command currently is that it won't budge. It's obstinate. It wants to break the detainees rather than try to meet them in the middle. As I mentioned, the authorities chose a solution to the searches of the Koran way back in 2006. It also gave the detainees the choice of turning in their Korans for safekeeping to protect them against being searched. It seems like that's a reasonable alternative. The command won't do either.
I see. Well, David, certainly a lot of information. Thank you for giving us some insight into this. That was David Reams, human rights attorney.